Ever think about, like, what it'd be like to find something that totally, like, rewrites history? Something that just changes everything we thought we knew about the past?
Yeah, like stumbling upon some crazy artifact or something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of what happened in 1938 when this museum curator in South Africa, Marjorie Courtenay Latimer, she found a fish that everyone thought was extinct for, like, millions of
Oh,
years.
wow, I've heard about this. The Coelacanth, right? It's like a living dinosaur or something?
That is the one. It was a huge deal for the scientific world, and today we're going to do a deep dive into Marjorie's life and the story of this crazy fish.
That sounds fascinating. What makes her story so interesting?
Well, she was kind of a rebel from a young age, always pushing boundaries and totally obsessed with nature.
So her childhood played a big part in shaping her passion.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine her as this little tomboy running around South Africa, collecting shells and bird eggs, even making friends with all sorts of animals. She was fearless.
You know, I read somewhere that she even had a run-in with a cobra when she was just a toddler.
Yeah, I read that too. It's crazy to think about. But those early experiences really shaped her. It's like they foreshadowed her adventurous spirit and her love for the unexpected.
It makes sense, though. Those close calls, they make you appreciate the power of nature, you know?
Totally. And that spirit led her to become the curator of the East London Museum at just 24 years old.
Wow, 24. And I read she didn't even have much formal education.
Right. It's amazing. Her knowledge of natural history was all self-taught.
Talk about dedication. She really wanted to learn and experience nature firsthand.
And she was resourceful, too. I mean, she built the museum's collection from scratch, using family donations, even her own clothes sometimes, for displays.
That's wild. It's like she could turn anything into a museum exhibit.
Exactly. But here's where things get really interesting. In 1936, she goes on this expedition to Bird Island.
Hold on, Bird Island. Wasn't that place off limits to women back then?
Yep. But she wasn't going to let that stop her. She even brought her mom along. Later, she even convinced her dad, who wasn't too happy about it at first.
It sounds like she had a way of winning people over.
Totally. Now let's jump to December 22nd, 1938, the day everything changed. Marjorie gets a call from a local fisherman about a strange catch.
This is it, the Coelacanth moment.
Oh,
Right.
you got it. But here's the thing. It was a crazy hot summer day, and she was super busy working on a dinosaur skeleton at the museum.
So she almost didn't go.
Yeah, she was hesitant, but something told her to go down to the docks.
Good thing she did. Imagine if she had stayed at the museum that day.
I know, right? History would be totally different. So she gets to the docks, and there is this massive, bizarre-looking fish, unlike anything she'd ever seen.
I bet her jaw just dropped.
I can only imagine. It was blue with these whitish spots and these crazy fins that looked like limbs, like something straight out of prehistoric times.
It must have been incredible, but how did she even preserve it? Wasn't it huge?
Yeah, it was a real challenge. No proper storage, no formalin, no taxidermist who had ever dealt with anything like it.
So what did she do?
She got creative. She used her own family's sheets to wrap it up and keep it from rotting in the heat.
Talk about thinking on your feet. She saved the most important parts, even with hardly any resources.
Right. And she knew she needed expert help.
Yeah.
So she contacted J.L.B. Smith, this ichthyologist who would eventually identify the fish.
But wasn't communication really slow back then?
Oh, yeah. This was way before emails and instant messaging. They had to rely on telegrams and letters, which could take forever to arrive.
Talk about frustrating, especially when you're dealing with a potentially groundbreaking discovery.
Exactly. And that's where we'll pick up next time when we dive deeper into that communication breakdown and how the Coelacanth was finally identified.
I'm already hooked. Can't wait to hear more about it.
Me too. It's a story that just keeps getting more fascinating.
Okay, so we left off with Marjorie contacting this ichthyologist, J.O.B. Smith.
Right. But I bet you're wondering why there was so much back and forth about this fish.
Yeah, wasn't everyone like super excited about it?
Well, you gotta remember, Marjorie was working in a small museum in South Africa. Limited resources, you know.
Right. Not exactly a big shot research institution.
Exactly. And some of her critics were from those fancy places with tons of money and big research teams.
Oh, I see. So they were kind of looking down on her.
Sort of. But here's the thing. Even with limited resources, she managed to preserve the key parts of the fish.
Which is what allowed Smith to identify it, right?
Exactly. And when he did, wow, this wasn't just any old fish. It was a living representative of a group that was thought to have died out with the dinosaurs.
Like a walking, well, swimming fossil.
Uh-huh, yeah. That's where the term living fossil comes from. These creatures have barely changed for millions of
This
years.
is mind-blowing, right? Gives us a glimpse into the distant past.
I know. It challenged everything scientists thought they knew about evolution.
So what happened next? Did Smith come running to South Africa?
Well, he desperately wanted to see another specimen to be sure it wasn't a fluke. But then World War II broke out.
Oh, wow. Everything got put on hold.
Pretty much. But after the war, Smith was on a mission. He started this huge campaign to find another coelacanth. Pamphlets, rewards, the whole 9 yards.
Like a scientific bounty hunt.
Exactly. And you know what? It worked. In 1952, another coelacanth was caught, this time off the coast of the Comoro Islands.
Thousands of miles away from South Africa, so there was more than one.
A whole population.
Hmm.
And get this, local fishermen in the Comoros already knew about these fish.
Really, they just didn't realize how scientifically important they were.
Exactly. Shows how much we can learn from local knowledge. And even though Marjorie wasn't involved in finding this second coelacanth, she got to see it when it arrived in South Africa with Smith and his family.
Oh, that must have been amazing. All that work finally paying off.
And over time, people started to recognize her contribution. She even got an honorary doctorate in 1971.
That's awesome. She never gave up on her passion.
Totally. And her legacy goes way beyond the Coelacanth. She helped turn the East London Museum into a respected institution. Plus, she was a huge advocate for protecting the environment.
A true visionary, always thinking ahead. But what about the Coelacanth itself? What happened to it after it was rediscovered?
Welcome back. We've been talking about Marjorie Courtenay Latimer and that crazy fish she found, the Coelacanth.
Yeah, a true living fossil, right.
So what happened to it after all the excitement died down?
Well, it turns out they're kind of hard to study. They live way down deep near these volcanic islands, and they only come out at night.
So it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack underwater in the dark.
Pretty much. Every time scientists see one, it's a big deal.
So we're still learning about them even now.
Oh, yeah. Their behavior, where they live, all that stuff. It's crucial for figuring out how to protect them.
Because they're endangered.
Oh, unfortunately, yeah. Both species that we know of.
It's crazy to think something that survived for millions of years could be wiped out because of us.
It's a wake-up call for sure, but it's also a challenge. How do you save something you barely understand?
That's where the scientists come in, right?
Exactly. They're using all this cool technology like underwater robots and even DNA analysis to learn more about them.
And working with the locals who've known about these fish for ages.
It's a team effort to figure out the best way to protect them.
It kind of reminds me of Marjorie's story. This one discovery sparked all this research and conservation efforts.
Totally. It shows how powerful curiosity can be. It can lead to all sorts of amazing things.
So what's the takeaway here? What can our listeners learn from all this?
Well, I think it reminds us that even the most ordinary-looking things in nature can hold incredible secrets, just like the Coelacanth.
Yeah, and that we should never stop exploring and asking questions. Who knows what other wonders are out there just waiting to be found?
Absolutely. It's been a blast talking about Marjorie and the Coelacanth with you.
Thanks for joining us. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure. Who knows what we'll uncover next?